It's Forbidden Door Week. We have a full preview of the big show coming up this Sunday. We will also take a look at the opening round of the G1 qualifiers. We have information on New Japan wrestlers taking a tour of Mexico with CMLL. Plus, what are Oscar and Yuta doing these days? We'll take a look at that. We'll also discuss the life of Sika and his time in New Japan Pro Wrestling. We've got a lot to talk about, plus any questions you have. With Jeremy Finestone, I'm Stephen Conway. This is Speaking of Strong Style. Welcome, everyone, to Speaking of Strong Style. I'm glad you're here joining us live here on YouTube or on the podcast later on. We're grateful for your time. And quite a few things to talk about this week, Jeremy. We had those first round matches, which did not light the world on fire. We're not going to sugarcoat that. Those opening round matches didn't light the world on fire. But a big pay-per-view and some setups we had from Dynamite last night. I feel like the Forbidden Door excitement has grown a little bit. It was not at an all-time high either recently, but I think the last couple of weeks and things have taken some decent steps. How are you feeling going into this one?
I was at a 5 before the Dynamite last night. I was at like a 7 by the time it ended. Yeah. And then when I woke up this morning and I saw a match being announced that included the Lucha Bros and Mystico being announced by one Tony Khan, not on his television, but in fact on social media for the 0 hour, I will tell you, my interest has dramatically increased if that feels like the most New Japan of New Japan matches that you have on the card for whatever reason. Now I'm starting to feel like there's some coalescing of New Japan-ness in this AEW crossover.
Yeah, they did add some a little bit of New Japan flavor to it. You're right, because we were looking at the card and just thinking, boy, there's a lot of people over there in the United States with no matches for this thing, which seemed odd. And then the other part of it was just simply that there didn't always feel like there was a lot of New Japan at all in this thing, but that's been added to. We have an IWGP World Heavyweight title match, an NJPW Strong title match that I'm very much looking forward to, and I mean, the main event is New Japan adjacent. I mean, who's going to complain about getting Swerve Strickland versus Will Ospreay? And we know that those two are brilliant. And New Japan adjacent, and that Will was our guy for a long time. So I'm excited. It could end up being an important night for New Japan in a lot of ways, though. There's potential here to set it on a very, very interesting new course if they pull the trigger on a couple of things here.
Well, I mean, the best way look at this, if you're comparing like the Swerve and Will Ospreay match, is that how different is this from like a Rev Pro show with New Japan talent on? Honestly,
okay,
you know what I mean? Like the main event of Swerve and Will Ospreay, you know, like you could argue that's very similar to like a Michael Oku, like Will Ospreay main event in the UK. The significance of Swerve and Will in the US is parallel to that. I'm not saying that Swerve is, you know, adjacent to Michael Oku, very much different. He is a much more elevated and experienced wrestler, but the trajectory of popularity for the match, right? You know, it's like, so you have this New Japan talent on this show. You have the IWGP title event, but it's not the main event of the show, right? No. You have the IWGP title potentially changing hands, and it's not even like what we're going off the air with. It's a little bit weird, and, you know, when you're looking at it from the New Japan point of view, you know, it doesn't necessarily leave a great taste in your mouth, but you understand that the exposure of these wrestlers potentially to the AEW audience, leading to more people wanting to watch New Japan, is what they're trying to chase, and I get that as well.
It's another top-heavy thing. It's important to remember, I think, that they can call it a joint venture between AEW and New Japan. This is an AEW show. It really is an AEW show. And all the Forbidden Doors have been AEW shows, really. And they've had New Japan guys on them. I know they're joint productions. I know they somehow split the money. I don't get into all that kind of stuff, but it's an AEW show. And they're going to end with their guys. And that's just how it's going to go on that. Now, also remember, in the big Madison Square Garden show, Kazuchika Okada beat Jay White for the IWGP World Heavyweight title not the main event. They put a bizarre Ring of Honor match on after that, so it didn't
Matt
even
Taven
go up
won that night. Matt Taven
won the main event of a Madison Square Garden show. It was a weird world, but yeah. Let's get some of the early comments on this. Flaming Shark's with us. Hello, Shark. Good to see you. He said, not super sequential in New Japan necessarily, but I'm quite excited for Forbidden Door. There's some amazing looking matches. Well, there really are. And it's a good lead into the G1. And he just says, but the two New Japan belts are probably changing hands. So I guess it's fairly consequential in a sense. And Venkin is here. Good to see you, Venkin. And he says, Mystico teaming with the Lucha Brothers is certainly interesting. That's what he seems to be looking forward to. And if Flaming Sharks is AEW featuring NJPW and now a bit of CMLL and Stardom. Yeah, and that's really what this is.
So should we just preview Forbidden Door now, or should we go through Soul and then go back?
Yeah, let's go through the early stuff there, the early in the week and the weekend, and then we'll get to Forbidden Door because it is worth talking about the real New Japan centric stuff. It won't take too long, folks. These two shows over the weekend were very much house shows. These were
they were library books. A lot of people were checked out.
Yes, very true. That's well put. And the first one was in Fukushima on Saturday in front of about 1,000 people, 1,071. And we're not going to go through each match. It's just not worth it, I don't think. Jeremy, do you think so? It's for all preview tags. Right?
No.
Yeah, okay.
So it's brutal to say, but no.
Let's go to the qualifying matches then. The very first one was Callum Newman and Yujiro Takahashi. So Newman did what he can here, but Yujiro simply will not have good matches. He's too slow. He's too dull. He doesn't do a whole lot. And so what you do is you just try to make it as entertaining as you can. But selling for Yujiro Takahashi as a babyface is a challenge because he just moves at a glacial pace in the ring. And there's only so much you can do selling. I mean, Ricky Morton and Ricky Steamboat would struggle to get anything out of a crowd selling for this guy. So he did what he could do. It was 12 minutes. It probably could have been 6. If Yujiro just wrestled at a normal pace of a human being, this match would have been 6 minutes long. That's about how much stuff they got in. But he teased getting the win for House of Torture with a low blow and a pimp juice. That at least scared the fans into waking up, thinking that maybe he'll move on
a little bit.
Yeah, the pimp juice is usually fairly protected. He did kick out, and then he ended up hitting a really nice looking ass cutter to win. So he moves on. Yujiro is out. Thank goodness we don't have to watch 9 more Yujiro singles matches. And Callum Newman goes on in the tournament.
Perfectly pedestrian, right? These are like the completest of completest matches. If you plan on watching everything in the G1, this is theoretically required viewing. And you know, there is some significance to this being one of the first matches of the old guard being passed over for the G1 for someone new. You know, like you weren't sure if Callum Newman was going to get the opportunity or if he was going to get screwed over by Yujiro. He went forward, and this is beginning a trend of the young guys, the young guy revolution, and New Japan saying it's like we are putting to rest the bullshittery of some of the G1 matches, and we're going to go back to a hard-hitting, demanding style, and we'll figure out ways to give guys nights off when we need to. But we are not going to cut corners. And even though this match wasn't of G1 caliber, the right guy went over, and it started setting a trend of, okay, these guys aren't going to be in it for sure. And now that we're letting you know that, like, have confidence that these matches will end up delivering come July.
We had Yoshihashi and Chase Owens in the next one, and this one was fine. It didn't feel like it was 14 minutes. It went 14:01. I have to say that I didn't feel like it was a 14-minute match. It felt a little quicker than that. Overall, pretty good. Again, not a classic, but a perfectly fine match. Yoshihashi managed to slip out of the package pile driver. He hit the karma to win, and I'm glad he won. And that's not really a knock on Chase. I like Chase Owens a little more than most people do, and I understand that why people don't, but I do feel that the next round, so the winner of this one faces Tomohiro Ishii. I feel like Ishii versus Yoshihashi is the more interesting matchup of these two, Chase and Yoshi, just because we don't see it that much because they're theoretically in the same faction. We just don't see Ishii against Yoshihashi very often. And I think that's just a more interesting thing than seeing Ishii wrestle another guy from Bullet Club again, and so I find this to be the more compelling second round matchup. And we're not really sure if Ishii is still in Chaos. He talks about how he's teaming mostly with, Tanahashi and working with Hantai and all that stuff, but they were Chaos guys at heart, and you just don't see it that often. So I'm happier to see a fresher matchup. And of course, that keeps things on a collision course for the potential Callum Newman Ishii rematch, and which is where I think they're going. And you still feel that way, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think they are. I was trying to remember the last time that Chase Owens beat Yoshihashi, and I thought it happened earlier this year, but I think he actually ended up beating Ishii. I'm not sure. Like in the New Japan Cup, I thought they had a face-off, and then Yoshihashi kind of got a win back here. I want to say that happened, but I'm not 100% sure. So, by the way, I got a head cold, and I'm a little loopy today, so I am doing my best here. Steven is going to be carrying most of the show, but if I'm more gravely than usual when you hear me in your lovely ear holes, I apologize for that.
There you go. Miguel. Okay. Miguel Rubio, please explain what I see in Chase Owens. Now, all right, I will. I don't see one of the best wrestlers in the world. Don't worry. I'm not delusional on this right here. What I do see is a perfectly serviceable wrestler who can put together a decent 12-minute match. And that's what this was. I mean, it went 14 minutes, and I didn't think it dragged. I thought it was perfectly good. Now, is he a main event guy? No. Is he a major title holder? No. But he serves, I feel, a valuable purpose within Bullet Club in that he can have a perfectly good 10, 12-minute match, and for the most part, put over somebody and protect the main guys in Bullet Club. And Yujiro mostly protects the guys in House of Torture, but his matches are bad. I don't find Chase matches to be bad very often. Again, not all-time classics. We're not talking about a Zack or a Will.
They lack electricity.
But they're perfectly fine technical wrestling matches, and they serve the purpose of getting another guy over for the most part. And this is an example of it. So, I'm glad he's not in the G1 because I think there are better choices at this stage. And I think we're seeing some of that. Like I said, Newman and Ishii is I'm torn on it because while I agree that we need new blood and things, I just on a personal level, I can't imagine not having Ishii in the G1 because he has the best G1 matches of any human being. So it's tough. I
will tell you this. When I watched this match, I did not know who won. But when I started this match and Chase Owens came to the ring and he got on his knee and he did the gun symbol and the close-up on his face, he had the biggest boo-boo face, and I knew he was losing this match.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like, I know that he loves New Japan. Yeah. And I know that he was willing to do the job to put somebody else over for the G1. But I fully expect that up to a few weeks ago, this guy thought he was going to be in the G1. And it actually kind of bummed him out. And so I don't know what the history of Chase Owens and New Japan is, but I could see this lighting a fire under him to be in a position to not be put in this position next year. I could totally see that. What that is required of him to do so, I do not know. But, if you want to do a Chase Owens and ELP babyface run and Chase Owens just kind of, gets a little trimmer and works with ELP and kind of meshes their styles together, that's not exactly the worst idea in the world. You know what I mean?
It's also a challenge for Chase in another way. He, Taiji Ishimori, even Kenta are in a no man's land. If you're not part of the War Dogs and you're not part of House of Torture, what exactly are you? You're just kind of there. And it's difficult to get going with that. And I feel like they tried to do something with he and Kenta as a tag team. It was fine. But again, Kenta's body is shot. He really can't do what he needs to do. At least Yoshihashi has Bishamon to fall back on, where they're a really good tag team. And when they're in with another good tag team, they have excellent matches. He has that at least. I really feel like right now, Ishimori is a brilliant wrestler, but Chase Owens and Kenta are really kind of lost in the woods in New Japan right now. There's really not.
He's perfectly serviceable, but he lacks teeth. And so you need to lean into something a bit more babyface with him, where he's got that plucky underdog that you kind of want to see him succeed when he's doing things the right way. And I think putting him with somebody, excuse me, that is already established, like ELP, that's already languishing and needs kind of a win, I do see something potential with that. But beyond that, like I've said for a while, there's going to have to be some total rejiggering of all the factions in New Japan right now. Whatever the plan is with the Bullet Club War Dogs, I definitely see some type of cutting of the fat of that stable at some point in the future, or at least like a get in line or get out kind of thing. And be curious to see what happens with Chase Owens when that kind of crossroads happens.
And Shark mentions that he wants the L's to find each other, El Desperado and El Fantasma, maybe a few others. Not sure what I do with Chase outside of BC. Yeah, and then the whole idea with, I wish there was a little bit more clarity with Chaos, Hantai. The Tongans are gone now. So, I mean, it's really just Jado and El Fantasmo hanging around. Gorillas of Destiny have gone to WWE.
Gorilla of Destiny.
Well, I mean, Jacob Fatu showed up, and I was wrong about that part. I thought he was going to join up with Roman and the Usos. Instead, he's completely with the Tongans on this. So I guess that'll be a group of 5 once Hikuleo gets in there.
Why doesn't Hikuleo join Roman?
I don't understand why he would, because his brothers are both in the other side, so he's just going to join up with them.
He still believes that Roman is the head of the table. We're going into WWE lore here, but
all right,
he might be like, no, I acknowledge you. I don't know why you guys are doing this. I acknowledge you.
Well, who knows? There's a lot of time. There's a lot of story to come on that side. Anyway, Venkin just says until El Fantasmo goes to WWE too.
Never say never.
No. Absolutely not. I mean, talented dude. So he should be somewhere in a decent role. All right. So that was pretty much the news. And I'll get into the main event because it was the same main event both nights. But the only other thing I wanted to mention from this show before we go to Ibaraki, which was the Sunday show, there was another 10-minute draw between Daiki Nagai and Yasuda in the opener. Another 10-minute draw. It was their 4th one. They've had 4 matches all against each other, all gone in 10-minute draws. Afterwards, I mentioned last week that these guys have pretty good facials for their starting point. Most guys are still counting steps, and you see them more focused on the moves, and it's all, chain wrestling and all this. And this one had more strikes than the first one, which is almost all chain wrestling and all. Submissions, the Boston Crab, but body slam, drop kick. That's about it. That's still where they are. Facial expressions were good. Daiki Nagai then goes and comments, Jeremy, and cuts a heel promo, and a decent one. And what I mean by that is he said, I've heard people say that we're too cocky. And he thinks, well, the thing is, I don't punch a clock like you people do. I'm not an office worker. I'm out here living my dream while you're over here watching me. So, like he threw some shade back at fans who maybe just said this guy comes off as cocky and just said, I don't punch a clock. So I just thought, I mean, considering it's his 4th match, he's cutting a decent heel promo. I see some promise in this guy. Both of them, for that matter.
I'm with you.
I just enjoyed that. I thought it was fun. Worth mentioning.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about this Toru Yano and Boltin Oleg match, and there's also a Toru Yano side note that I wanted to share with you at some point.
Yeah, okay, we'll do that. Let's go ahead and talk about that. So the next day they were in Kamisu Ibaraki. That's in front of about 770 people on Sunday. And most of the same, with a couple of guys changed, undercard of preview tags. Then we got to the B block qualifier tournament matches, and it was Oleg Boltin against Toru Yano. Now, of course, both these guys have been amateur wrestlers in time, so they did a lot of that. There was a lot of amateur wrestling in this match. It went about 9 minutes and 16 seconds, and it was more wrestling, like I said, than we're used to from Yano. Of course, he's not anywhere near Oleg's level on amateur wrestling, but he was an accomplished amateur wrestler in school, basically, was what Yano did. And Boltin ended up winning with a cradle, and he ended up pinning Toru Yano. Yano even used a chair on him and some other hijinks. There was some Yano-esque stuff, taking the turnbuckle pad off and things. But this was about putting over Oleg Boltin, and he won with a cradle that he used. He said in the post-match comments, he used that very same move to win the All Kazakhstan Amateur title, and he also used it in another tournament. It's something he apparently pulls out of his bag of tricks when he needs a win, when he needs the wrestling equivalent of a knockout. He needs to get a pin And he has used this in some amateur competitions. He uses it here to move on in the G1. I thought that was a very nice touch that they worked that move in. And of course, Yano knows how to go into it in a way that doesn't look like trash because he was an amateur wrestler. So he got this thing, got the roll up on Yano, won the match. Bolton Oleg goes over Toru Yano and moves on to face Hiroshi Tanahashi.
He was also powerful enough to power out of a crotch blow before Yano rolled him up, and then he countered it with his own finish that you had mentioned previously. Yeah, Flaming Shark read my mind. I was thinking about the Sami Zayn comparison. ELP has a perfect line of sight to that Sami Zayn vibe. He definitely you can do things with El Fantasma. I think that is just, we've had him on the show. We've had both him and Hikuleo on the show. They were fantastic, giving us some time and talk about their contracts and all that stuff. So he could easily sign somewhere next year. That's the deal with him. But he's a guy that gives 100% no matter what company he works for, and I'm a big fan of that. Anyways, speaking of Toru Yano, I was on a Discord with a non-wrestling group of friends, and one of them actually is a wrestling fan, and he lives in Japan. And he wrote a note that said DDT ran perhaps the funniest pro wrestling show he had ever seen, and it was utterly amazing. And this was 2 days ago. It was a one-match show: Super Sasadango Machine versus Takagi Sanshiro. It featured a rundown of different attendee seating options, the audience run-ins, a petite rumble, a mini rumble of sorts, plenty of pro wrestling cameos, an audience birthday celebration, a work retirement ceremony with a ceremonial Tengong salute, ending with a PowerPoint presentation that effectively ended the match and replaced Takagi with NJPW comedy genius Toru Yano.
Well, you know who else made a cameo in that one that I found out, but I learned a little bit more about this, was Momo Kogo from Stardom, ended up as a part of this match, and both caned and got caned at various points. So this was all over the place. Yeah, apparently Yano went out there and had some fun with the DDT boys.
Shout out to my buddy Pete for that note.
All right, so let's go
on.
Not
nearly as entertaining as that description as this match, so we'll get to that shortly.
Well, TJP and Satoshi Kojima, once again, not bad. It was a perfectly fine match. Both these guys know how to work. But I'm not going to say that there was a big to-do about it. This is mostly, again, about getting TJP to the next spot. And Satoshi Kojima missed the lariat. TJP caught him. What move was it here? I think I wrote it down. No, just a roll-up out of the lariat. He rolled him up out of the lariat. That's right. It was a bit of a flash.
He super kicked him off of the lariat, and then blocked it with the super kick, and then went off to the ropes and did that little
roll-up. Yeah, so there you go. So
kind of thing.
This is all about TJP getting to the next level. Kojima kind of giving him the congratulations and things. So Kojima is past the point age-wise where he's going to do a G1. And again, there's some more story to be told with TJP. It's interesting if TJP gets in. It's also very interesting if TJP doesn't get in as far as the United Empire goes. So we'll have to find out how that worm turns on July 3rd and 5th.
It was all perfectly fine. Like I said, this is required if you want to watch everything in the G1 and feel like you have gotten your full G1 experience in New Japan World. But if you do not watch these and someone tells you who won, it's like a TV match in the middle of like Raw or SmackDown or AEW. It is literally just a match to be had on Rampage. That's what these felt like. They just didn't have any commercial breaks.
The main events each night were about the same. It was LIJ over House of Torture, and it was very simple stuff. Fan service to a T. Naito would hit the Destino to win. He would thank the fans for coming out. He would note how long it had been since they were in that particular town. He would hit the roll call. Everybody goes home happy. It was just a classic house show finish on each night. Yeah, very academic.
Totally academic.
So that was the New Japan action that was specific New Japan shows this week. And coming up, we will have Yoshihashi against Tomohiro Ishii, and that's on July 3rd at Korakuen Hall. On the other side of the bracket, Callum Newman will be wrestling Kenta for the spot to face the winner of Yoshihashi Ishii.
And then we have...
On the other side, also at Korakuen Hall on the 3rd, it'll be Oleg Boltin against Hiroshi Tanahashi on one side. On the other side, TJP against the Holy Emperor Taichi. And so, again, this could be a lot of different ways this could go. The TJP Taichi thing, I really feel, is almost 50-50. Taichi has been a longstanding G1 guy. He goes in just about every year. So does Hiroshi Tanahashi, of course. And so one or both of those guys might not be there. It seems very strange to think that we might not have Taichi or Ishii or Tanahashi in there. But I'll tell you what, I was watching Power Bombshells on Sunday, our sibling show here, and there was a clear sentiment among both the hosts and the people watching and commenting that they simply want the new guys. And people are excited at the idea of the new guys. And there's a real groundswell. For me, maybe I'm not ready to let go of Ishii yet. And but it's a thing where people do want to see the new guys. So if New Japan is tapped into that, it's not something they do. I still think that Oleg is a real underdog to get to the G1 for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think he's ready to wrestle at that level. He is coming along and improving, but having G1 level matches, I think, is a little beyond his reach right now in 2024, summer of 2024. Won't always be, but I feel like they are right now. The other side of that is, Jeremy, I was thinking about this. As much as they have gone out of their way to avoid beating him, to avoid showing you losing, he's lost a few, but to avoid you seeing him get beat. It seems like losing to Tanahashi, he's going to have to lose sometime. If he loses to Tanahashi and then Tanahashi says, man, I barely got past that, man. You're really coming along, kid. That one loss might not hurt as much as taking 4 or 5 losses in the G1 or 6 losses in the G1. They really don't like to show us him, Ole, getting beat. But Tanahashi in that match would kind of be one of those times when it wouldn't hurt him too much. So I'm leaning a little bit more toward him having a valiant effort but coming up short. I just don't know that they're ready to strap the rocket to him yet in this situation, because again, the G1, man, that's tough. That's 9 tough matches, and no Yano, no Yujiro. There's no nights off.
This play-in bracket is a watch the world burn scenario. There is no scenario in which anyone is universally happy with who is going to get into this, bracket. There are people that still want to see Hiroshi Tanahashi or Taichi be in there. There are people that are overwhelmingly demanding that Bolton Oleg, that it's his time, like you're saying on Power Bombshells. It's like TJP is far and away to me the dark horse candidate to get there, but at the same time, I don't rule it out. It's like he could beat Taichi, and then he could beat whoever is on the other side. It's like it's not impossible, right? And so the scenarios here are very much in question. If it were me, I would do Bolton Oleg and Callum Newman and just get him in there and do the seasoning. I think that we are in a crossroads right now, and I understand the sentiment of like the Powerbomb shows and the people watching it. Like the top guys of the last generation have more or less like past their prime or left. So when you are leaning on those and you are denying the opportunities for the next generation to elevate and escalate their prominence within the promotion, and you are holding off on that, they're wondering, why am I sticking around? Like if we're just going to see the same things that I saw 3 or 4 years ago without the main event, that's not doing anything for me. So that's where I think the disconnect between, do you go with the mainstays that you love to see, or do you take a chance and respond to the criticisms and addresses of the 10-point plans and all these things, and you just pull the trigger, and whether they're ready or not, you put them in the deep end and you say, we're going to find out.
It's a thing where Shark, I think, might have this exactly right. We'll see if we're to see. It's kind of where I'm leaning also. It is absolutely an opportunity to make a statement for New Japan. I'm kind of in a camp they go halfway, and Newman might get through in A, but it ends up being Taichi or TJP in B. I think that could be very well the case. I've stated my case about why I don't think it's going to be Bolton, but Taichi is an excellent guy. He's an excellent wrestler, and he's good in the G1. TJP, like I said, there's story to be told right there. Even Tanahashi, he's the president and he's a mainstay. So
Tanahashi to me is the least likely.
Yeah, but like I was going to say that I feel like if Tanahashi really felt like he could do this, he would have just put himself in. And then he mentions too, Shark says, if they actually put Oleg in the G1, maybe he has some Goldberg style matches that are quick and crazy. He wins quick or loses quick, and they give wrestlers that type of a break. That's an interesting one. An interesting point that they could do. I just worry that they just don't want to beat him that much. But on the other side, my thing for Ishii is simply sentiment. I think Ishii is my favorite G1 Climax wrestler, so that's where my heart is on that. But I could absolutely see Callum Newman getting that win back over Ishii after that tremendous match they had, and then advancing on to the G1 and having him be sort of the next generation after the Musketeers. As this year's new guy, and I know we have new guys like Takeshita and things, but like an actual youth movement guy coming in, I could see them doing that, especially if Ishii is talking to Tanahashi and just saying, "Yeah, bro, that's 9 matches in my body. Might not be a match."
I'm curious about whether Ishii actually has a match with Orange Cassidy upcoming after the AEW Dynamite, because I kind of just want to see what shape he's in before July 3rd. I know that sounds a little like weird, but that's kind of how I feel about it right now. I just kind of want to see what he's like, because I think Yoshihashi and him, I think I can see him doing a couple matches, but Callum Newman, like it's hard to stop the Callum Newman momentum right now.
And Newman can have excellent matches. We've seen it. He's done it. Don't know if Bolton's ready for that part yet, but we know you could actually put Newman in and he could get 9 good matches. He doesn't have to win them. Just has to have. He would be a classic case, Jeremy, of somebody who doesn't. What Hangman Page was a few years ago. We keep going back to that because he basically made his name in this tournament. But a guy who doesn't have to win his matches, but can really show how good he is in these matches. This is a real opportunity for him. He could go 3-6 and come out as the guy that everyone's just saying, God, he's good. It could work out for him like that. Should we get to some
Orange Cassidy and Tomohiro Ishii have a match on Collision this week on Saturday. Okay. But Ishii is not on the pay-per-view.
Can we just say, by the way, that we're going to give some Collision spoilers over the course of this show, just so you know. If you're like that, you don't want to know anything about that. Once we start talking about Forbidden Door and setting up Forbidden Door, a couple things happen on Collision that's going to play into it, and we're going to spoil some shit. So just so you know.
Can we use now to just give the programming notes about what's going on over the next couple weeks for the show?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, given it could be a little wild. You may realize that next week is July 4th. Stephen and I have decided that because there is a July 3rd show, we're just going to go ahead and do our show as normal because we're boring. And we just want to make sure that the podcast is out there and we can.
It's not dark yet. It's not dark yet. We're not shooting off any fireworks during the show.
And then we might come back later on in the weekend. But the big news that we want to share with you is that we are coming back live on Sunday night after Forbidden Door for Fight Game Media. And we will be your representatives giving you the pay-per-view recap that you need to know everything New Japan that happened at Forbidden Door. And I usually do these on the Boom with Kevin Ely, but he is not going to be around this week. So we're pivoting Stephen Conway in. We're putting the Freaky Strong Style banner up on the screen, and we are going to be covering everything that we preview here today and more.
All right. A couple of random questions here I want to get to. I think we tackled Dunstan's question about Tanahashi being in it. Should he be? We're leaning toward the youth movement on that, but I am predicting that Tanahashi is going to beat Bolton there. But it doesn't mean that Tanahashi's moving on. I think that could absolutely be Taichi or TJP out of that side. He said, should New Japan try to get Dijakovic? Well, I think Dijakovic would be a terrific New Japan wrestler. I think that's a very interesting guy that could have. And should the Lucha Bros win the tag team titles? No. Moving on. I don't want. No, thank you. No gracias. All right. I like
No Penta. Me gusta.
No me gusta. I like Penta.
All right.
Yeah.
I know how you feel about this. I think you're gonna not like how things are gonna be playing.
I know. Well, we have such a wonderful track record of people not in New Japan holding New Japan titles, and it's just been great. The FTR thing, the Carl Anderson thing, the Moxley thing, it's a winner every time, Jeremy. Let's do it some more, especially with a guy who does 16 different things. Like I said, only half of which look good, and only a third of which actually make a damn lick of sense. And Penta, who's decent.
Sassafras, aren't you?
Phoenix just needs a tranquilizer dart, just calm down. It's gonna be okay. You don't have to do it.
Okay, so we have a couple of matches announced for upcoming that I'm going to post that we got coming on July 3rd, and they have given us some graphics for it. So officially, we got Hiroshi Tanahashi versus Boltin Oleg.
Yes, sir.
Callum Newman versus Kenta.
Kenta looking young in that picture. Kenta, that's a flattering picture of Kenta right there. When did they take that? That's
they got the highlights. Look at this.
That's like it's 10-year-old Tinder picture. I'd swipe on that.
Back up in 2019 and assaulted Shibata. They never changed the photo.
TJP versus TJP. Yeah, this should be terrific. By the way, that should be a really good match. And then
this is all on the same night. So you got 4 loaded matches theoretically.
Yeah.
Given that only 4 of these guys are going to have to come back 2 days later, you could expect, some potentially consequential, hard-hitting matchups. Or you could get more of the same that we got a couple of days ago. You decide, but we'll be here either way to tell you what happened.
Yeah. And, of course, again, we want to go over this. The winner of Tanahashi and Boltin will face the winner of Taichi and TJP. The winner of Ishii and Yoshihashi will face the winner of Newman and Kenta.
All right.
That's how that's going to go. And Shark's excited about the Korakuen Hall show, so it's going to be good. I think so.
Any other news of note, New Japan, before we climb into this Forbidden Door portal?
Oh, let me look and see what we got there. I think we can go ahead and start talking about Forbidden Door. Right. And
let's palate cleanse with the Dynamite show from last night.
Pretty entertaining show, I thought. Now, it started with BCC and LIJ. So by BCC, we mean in this case Claudio Castagnoli, Jon Moxley, and Yuto Wheeler against Titan, Shingo Takagi, and Hiromu Takahashi. And this was an AEW version of a preview tag, really. They had a match where everybody does their stuff, everybody hits their spots, and apparently it had a time cue, and apparently they knew exactly what that time cue was, because they just kind of wrestled until one moment when the referee said, "Okay, Mox," and Mox just went for no reason whatsoever, grabbed a chair and whacked Hiromu across the back with it for the DQ. Like, time, we gotta go. So he just does the DQ. This meant absolutely nothing, except it was some pretty decent wrestling action, and it was simply a vehicle for Tetsuya Naito to do a long, slow stroll out to the ring and confront Moxley. And so that was it. They just went for the stare down. The other thing we had was a bit of a confrontation between Shingo Takagi and Bryan Danielson, which this might be the match I'm most looking forward to from Sunday, really. Danielson and Shingo. So we had a little bit of that, a little face-to-face between the people that will square off on Forbidden Door.
So the most interesting thing that was in this match to me was the Wheeler Yuta Hiromu Takahashi stuff.
Yeah,
I thought they were the most engaged with each other in the entire match. Everyone else is just kind of doing their shit and mid-card matching it, honestly. Like, a lot of AEW fans probably didn't see how very New Japan, middle of the card, mixed multi-man tag match this was. But it very much was, even down to the fact that they would just do a DQ in the middle of it, like a House of Torture match, and you'd end it. Like, it's not impossible that it would end that way. But everyone there had done time in Japan. The Blackpool Combat Club had come over there. And so when I watched it, this was the most New Japan mid-card match I'd ever seen. It felt that way. And, it was a means to an end. And I kind of predicted that Blackpool Combat Club versus LIJ and a big tag was going to be somewhere in Forbidden Door. It didn't happen at Forbidden Door, but it certainly did happen on the route to it.
So some comments on this one that I like here. Shark just said, "I love how little Naito cares about everything." Well, that is his character. Tranquilo, don't rush it, all that stuff. And Osprey and Venkin just says the Danielson and Shingo is the match. I'm personally most looking forward to. But my goodness, this main event's going to be brilliant. And he says until Ospreay and Swerve in the main event outshines everyone. Very, very possible, even likely. And then Shark
I know it's not going to get the time. I know it's not going to get the time, and I know that it's on the 0 hour. But that LIJ Mystico Penta and Phoenix match to me is like my bread and butter.
And then Shark says Ghetto booked a random Dynamite match. Apparently, yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it was a little bit like that. We also, let's see, what else was on this? Oh yes, so the Acclaimed was out there with Billy Gunn. Now this this whole segment cracked me up. So they're out there, the Acclaim's out there, and then out come the Jacksons. We had them out there with Okada. Okada swore on the microphone. That got a pop. Don't know what else to do with them apparently. And so Huey and Dewey and Okada challenged the Acclaimed, right? And they said, now let's have a match. We're gonna have a match. And then Billy Gunn just so happens, Jeremy, by the coincidence of all coinky-dinks, Hiroshi Tanahashi already had sent in a video saying he wanted to team with them. My question for you, Jeremy, is if the Young Bucks and Okada hadn't come out and challenged him, was Billy Gunn going to call Tana and say, I don't know, no one came out. We don't have a match. Sorry, bud. I mean, like it's as if he already knew. He already knew, right? Yeah. So they have hey, let's have a match. Gee whiz, I guess I'll accept it. And then I guess I'll play this pre-recorded segment of a guy already accepting to be in the match that you hadn't challenged for yet. So yeah. Nice job, Tony. But so they had this thing, and Tanahashi says scissor ace, and I guess it's a chance for a chant, and to see Tanahashi and Okada in there again, and for everybody else to just be on the card. So it's a way to get some more people out there, and we'll get Tanahashi and the Acclaimed. No Billy Gunn, so that's probably a step forward. And then against Okada and the Bucks.
I had to bake it. I had to put it up there. I had to find it, and I had to grab it.
Shark, all old men know each other in wrestling. That's probably true.
He totally did the whole I know president, and I'm like wink, wink, nod, nod, and you're just like whatever, Hunter, all these other people, but he also knows Tana, and you're just like okay, whatever, blah. I saw this frankly, and I thought, okay, Tanahashi's losing to Okada. He's taking the pin.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
so. Dunson mentioned
probably
Okada
one of
smile.
the only guys in New Japan willing to take a pin to Okada right now.
Okada's smile when he saw Tana made me happy. That's Venkin like that part there. And Shark just mentioned that it keeps Okada away from anything important for the future while getting Okada on the show.
I don't want to talk about keeping Okada away from anything important because what the fuck are we doing? Okada is not in any what has Okada done since he beat Kingston? What has he done?
He stands between Huey and Dewey.
He made racist one-liner slant-eyed Asian joke, and it bothers him. This is caricature shit, and I'm just like, whatever. This is what you're paying Okada to do, and this is what you want to do with it. Sure, okay.
It's what Huey and Dewey want to do with him. There you go. And the heel authority figure. My God, what an innovative idea! Time has come.
If you want him to curse and say bitch in a Japanese accent, sure, fine. I'm sure a lot of America just pops at that, but he's better than that. And I just put him in some matches, show the world what this guy can do. But Ultimo Guerrero, because you wanted him in a mask, I don't. Stay in touch with pro wrestling, Tony Khan. Please just stay in touch with pro wrestling and not what you remember it to be when you were keeping track of everything else.
So another thing that was an angle for this that I'm interested in, it's Bushi Road adjacent. How about that? Maybe not a New Japan thing, but the Toni Storm Mina Shirakawa match. So that's AEW versus Stardom. Of course, Toni has been a big part of Stardom's history and a major player as a foreigner in Stardom. So she's going to be wrestling Mina. And of course, Mariah May is torn between the two of them. That's been a story that's been going on for months and months. They had a thing on the show where Mariah was accompanying both women to the ring as they teamed up. Mariah, Toni, and Mina. AEW likes doing these odd couple things where people who are wrestling each other team up the week before. And they had them against Harley Cameron, Saraya, and Anna Jay. And then Mina went to hit Toni afterwards after they won the match with the champagne bottle. Toni ducked. She smashed Mariah in the face, Jeremy. What is Mariah going to do on Sunday? I'm kind of intrigued because I think Mariah's played this great where she's she's a big fan of Toni Storm. She admires Toni. She said it's the reason she went to Stardom. On the other hand, she's still loyal to her Club Venus teammate from Stardom. It's kind of, it's done in a very over-the-top way, but it's kind of it makes sense. Like this whole thing that she would be torn between these two people and she's going to have to make a decision. I'm interested in seeing which decision she makes.
I have really liked the build for Mina and Toni, and I give a lot of credit to Mina Shirakawa. Frankly speaking, she has over-delivered to the expectations of everyone in this, and she comes off as a bigger star than a lot of the AEW roster does, sight unseen. She knows herself, she knows her character, and the camera loves her. This is a fantastic build. The only thing that I would say is that between this and the Ospreay builds, I wish that what they did this week on both of those builds, they flipped with what they did last week on both of those builds with the contract signings, where they did the tag matches together last week and then the contract signings this week. For whatever reason, I feel like the heat of those, had it been the go home before the pay-per-view, would have hit a lot harder than the opposites and crazy feud. Because if Mariah had been hit with the bottle last week and then they do the contract signing and then Mina and Toni are making her choose after that, I think that is an interesting dynamic as well.
Okay. Shark just says the Mina and Toni feud's been something else. It felt like such a Stardom feud throughout. I love how long it has had to build several Toni title defenses. And he also mentions that Mariah's been the best part of the feud. As much as I love Mina and Toni, she's been fantastic. And ever since she's been in AEW, she's been great. He says, Mina's been presented so well and she's pulled everything off well. She's very, very good. And it's not easy to do when you don't speak the language. It's possible. And Mina's proving that. She's getting over. She's getting over despite all that. And Dunstan says it has the best, this feud has the best build by far for Forbidden Door. Where do you see it going, Jeremy? I think she's going to go with Shirakawa at the end of this, simply for one basic reason, is that the feud is eventually Mariah versus Toni, and Mina's going to go back to Japan. So it's not like if she could go with Toni and vanquish Mina, so to speak, but it's probably time to pull the trigger on that, don't you think?
I think Mariah is going to end up winning the Owen Hart Cup and face off against Toni at Wembley. I think that's been the build.
And so then maybe she could help Toni and then let the tension build the other way through the tournament.
We need to go through this card from the top to bottom because the 0 hour actually leads into all of this. Okay. So the 0 hour actually has the Mariah May Owen Hart Cup match in there. Yeah. But we have to run down what the Rampage spoilers before we get there. So we're about 2 minutes away from getting into what we think could happen with Mariah May.
Okay. So should we just go ahead with the matches and just go bottom to top?
We'll just run down the Rampage and let them know what happened in Rampage because it is important for the preview. Gabe Kidd, for whatever reason, shows up with Roderick Strong and they face off against the Infantry. We have Orange Cassidy in a 2-on-1 match with the Outrunners. Has nothing to do with Forbidden Door, apparently. God help the Outrunners for losing a 2-on-1 match to Orange Cassidy. We have El Phantasmo versus AR Fox. Now, AR Fox just recently lost a match to Shingo Takagi for entrance into the Owen Hart Cup. So him losing, spoiler alert, AR Fox losing to El Phantasmo so that El Phantasmo is the ladder match entrant into the TNT championship match.
Good addition.
That is one of the biggest developments of the Rampage moving forward that we found.
That's going to help that match a lot. And El Phantasmo in the ladder match is probably a really good idea.
We have Queen Aminata and Sky Blue, and then we have Shingo Takagi versus Dalton Castle, which is essentially a warm-up match. Dalton Castle is incredibly underrated, and that as a wrestler. This was actually taped a week ago. Did you hear about that? They taped this at the Dynamite because they didn't have another date ready, and they did the Collision taping right after Dynamite so that they were free and clear to go into Sunday. So we also have the Collision spoilers.
Okay.
And that is Serena Deeb defeated Kelly Madden. Orange Cassidy and Tomohiro Ishii defeated TMDK's Robbie Eagles and Shane Haste, so not the actual IWGP champions, just part of the faction.
That was set up on an unholy mess of a bad angle on this show where they just
looked like okay, that was basically just like that. Okay, sure.
12 people in the ring looking at each other. No, that was wacky, but I guess it led to something approaching a match, and they had it. So good for them.
So while Mercedes Mone was ringside, Stephanie Vaquer defeated Lady Frost in a non-title match. Hechicero defeated Kevin Blackwood. Daniel Garcia defeated The Butcher. And then Owen Hart Foundation Tournament quarterfinal, Hikaru Shida defeated Deonna Purrazzo. And then El Phantasmo, Jack Perry, and Konosuke Takeshita defeated Mark Briscoe, Leo Rush, and Dante Martin. El Phantasmo is a heel.
Because he was the last time Tony watched wrestling in New Japan, which is probably 2018 or whatever.
Because they're making him. They got him in the spot.
Don't forget, we ended up with Minoru Suzuki somehow on this show too, which made in an angle that also made absolutely zero sense. So
here's the deal: I don't know if that actually is going to be the thing, because I think there's something on Collision that there's not in this recap that has Jeff Cobb, Big Bill, and Chris Jericho versus Samoa Joe, Hook, and Katsuyori Shibata.
Whatever.
Which, after all the chirping by Jeff Cobb on New Japan Pro Wrestling TV and all the backstage comments of "Give me your best, give me your brightest" on the pay-per-view in which you could spotlight this the most, they fail to deliver the dream match of Jeff Cobb versus Samoa Joe. I have no doubt, based off of what I've seen, that this match will happen. But it is a swing and a miss not to deliver this match as a singles match on the main card. I don't know why you have to appease Chris Jericho that badly to make sure that he has a match on this card. But the only thing that made sense is that if they did Jeff Cobb versus Samoa Joe, it meant that Chris Jericho's up shit creek with him having a match, and we couldn't have that. And for whatever reason, that annoys me, even though I have no basis in reality that is actually the case.
But Jeremy, this is all because of Chris Jericho. Just ask him. Forbidden Door is all because of Chris Jericho, because he accepted that match with in New Japan years ago.
And I will not let you do it. I will not let the bad talk win.
It's all due to him. Just ask him. He's a great ambassador for pro wrestling. He'll be the first to say
sadness in Stephen Conway.
God,
you are not going to make the list, Stephen Conway.
I agree with you, and you know that I can't. The only thing that could redeem this, and I do mean the only thing, we're going to go through the matches. We're getting off track on some of this stuff. If they have a 6-man match, Cobb does a few things, but not a whole lot. He gets the win and grabs the microphone and just says, "Enough of this crap. Nobody is going to challenge me for this TV title." And there's an impromptu thing afterwards. It's the only answer I'll accept. Other than that, it's a swing and a miss, like you said. He's talked about it so much. I find it hard to believe he's not just going to snatch the microphone and just say, anybody in the locker room. And there's somebody out there. We'll see.
Yes. All right. Official Forbidden Door preview.
Yes, we're finally getting to it. 15 minutes into our Forbidden Door preview, it's time for the Forbidden Door preview.
There's a lot of groundwork to lay because Tony Khan doesn't have a clear path and a sense of order.
We have the 0-hour trios match that is pretty compelling, I got to say. Mystico, one of the all-time great Mexican legends, certainly of the 21st century. I suppose that he doesn't quite get in there with Blue Demon and El Santo and things, but one of the great stars of Lucha Libre, teaming up with the Lucha Brothers to face Yota Tsuji, Titan, and Hiromu Takahashi. Now, I know that I've been teasing Fenix a lot about some of his work, but this is exactly the kind of match where it makes where you can use those talents, because this is just going to be a fun pedal to the metal spot fest to get the crowd, a crowd that's already going to be jazzed up. I mean, they're really going to have fun with this one. I have no doubt that this match is going to deliver and people are going to enjoy it.
What do you want to bet? A crisp $5 bill that no one will mention that Yota Tsuji, Titan, and Hiromu Takahashi held the never open weight 6-man titles for a week last month. Former title holders in the 6-man division. Do they mention it at all? What do you think?
Somebody might slip it to Excalibur. Excalibur might actually pay attention. I think Excalibur might actually watch NJPW World.
Are you taking me up on this bet?
No. no. Vankin, by the way, says spoiler: Mystico wins. Flaming Shark says Mystico over Teton. Yeah, and thinking Teton's getting pinned. I guess we all kind of agree there.
I didn't even have to say anything.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. You know, the thing is, it even works for Mexico because while Teton is a star in Mexico, Mystico is the star. So you could have that finish and it doesn't hurt anybody.
Here's my problem with Forbidden Door in a nutshell. Okay, this is the most New Japan AEW crossover match that they have offered for the entire card, and it is on the pre-show. Like everything else on this is fine. You have the dream singles matches or anything like that, but the most like intrinsically through the veins of New Japan and through the veins of CMLL and through the veins of AEW is this match. And the fact that it isn't actually on the main card and it is on the pre-show with Yota Tsuji and Hiromu and Ray and Pet. I don't know, man. It feels like you have too many mouths to feed and you're losing sight of what the point of this collaboration was about.
Did Rocky Romero have anything to say about this, Jeremy? He mentions that Penta, Zero, MA, and Ray Fenix are contracted to AEW and not affiliated with any other company, certainly not one that is in the very front of the alphabetical order of professional wrestling. They are certainly not in any way, shape, or form involved with anything that sounds exactly like the people you tow when your battery runs out in your car. They are not at all with AAA. No, Suri Bobski. This is not an issue. So nobody in CMLL land panic and pull these guys off the show at the last second. Please, we're asking politely.
What a brilliant business move back when there were phone books. You know, just make your business title AAA.
He used to do that. There are all kinds of businesses that used to do that very thing right there. And by the way, Shark just mentioned this. He said Excalibur comes off as someone who actually watches New Japan, but I'm not sure I would even want to bring that up on commentary myself. Yeah,
well, I mean, if you want to talk about the legitimacy of the team, if they're facing the people that you are familiar with, Penta and Phoenix. And you're like, well, what about the Titan? You know what I mean? Like, you talk about the fact that they were just recently title holders over in New Japan. I mean, you sell with what you got. And they did win for like a week. And I think it was more to make sure that Yota Tsuji got a win over Hiroshi Tanahashi before getting a win over Hiroshi Tanahashi. Doesn't mean nearly as much if I had to read between the tea leaves there. But it still happened. So, like, do something with it.
After that, we have this one, which brings a little more stardom to the show, which is Welcome to Me. Chris Statlander teaming with that evil, no good, dirty, rotten son of a gun, Momo Watanabe. Jeremy, did you see what happened on Sunday at the show, or Saturday at the show right there? So they had Queen's Quest against Oedo Tai in a special match here. This is this past weekend in Stardom, where it's an elimination match. The last person to lose, right? If you're the last person for your faction, you lose. Everybody else from your group has to leave your faction. It's essentially assassinating either Queen's Quest or Oedo Tai. Momo Watanabe faked out turning babyface to set up the Queen's Quest team, and then turned heel again, sided with Natsuko Tora. Queen's Quest is obliterated. It's down to just one member, Saya Kamatani. Poor Saya is all by herself in Queen's Quest. The group, and now, whether it's a coincidence that the group that Io Shirai formed was just destroyed just as Io Shirai is about to go work for Marigold, probably not a coincidence. But nevertheless, Momo Watanabe, the lowest of the low, Jeremy. You don't get any lower than this one. And they are facing the babyface team of Willow Nightingale and Tam Nakano.
Steven, did you know that Tony Khan said yesterday that he believes that AEW has the best women's wrestling division in the world?
That's adorable. Isn't he cute when he has his little stories? He makes up his little stories. He's so adorable.
I couldn't even keep up with what you were telling me about Stardom, but I was utterly compelled. And the only thing that I could think of was like, Tony Khan tried to tell me that he has the best women's wrestling division.
Let's think about this for a second.
I don't want to, because we have litigated this elsewhere.
Best day of its life, it's fourth, maybe fifth, or maybe best, fourth or fifth. I haven't watched enough TJPW to know, but it's certainly behind Stardom. It's behind Marty Gold. It's behind WWE.
My frustration with AEW women's wrestling is that the first 5 months were predicated and hinged around Toni Storm and a black and white acting gimmick and the build to Mercedes Mone debuting at Double or Nothing. There were plenty of solid and good women's wrestling matches on the undercard of many shows up to that point, but there was no real emphasis and making it the main event focus until those two were like it. Like all the other ones just kind of pivoted around the Mercedes angle, including these two, Willow and Chris Statlander, and then Mariah and Toni. And Mariah is absolutely a success story, 100%. But when you are saying that you have the best division in the world, you are supposed to say these things when you are a promoter and you are trying to sell your product. But you can't bring Tam Nakano, Momo Watanabe, and a number of these other talents in there and then compel us to believe that they are on the level as everyone else. Yeah. They are superior.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Stardom's much, much better. Marty Gold's much, much better. I mean, most of the top women in WWE are much, much better. It's anyway. That not even the point. It's and all of those, by the way, present their women better than AEW does for the most part.
And so we have the Owen Hart Cup tournament quarterfinal. Everything starts in the quarterfinals. This is the entry level, but in order to make it seem important, it is a quarterfinal match. This is before Toni Storm and Mina Shirakawa have their match, but after Mariah May had been injured by the bottle of champagne. So the real drama here is Mariah May recovered enough to be able to overcome Saraya and move forward in the Owen Hart Cup tournament? Steven, I'm going to go with yes. I think.
Yeah, I am too. I think it makes a lot of sense for the Shirakawa Toni storyline also for her to be coming off a win. And that's something that she needs to be on a high. She needs to be on a roll. And they can even say, look at what she has overcome. And now she's stuck in the middle of her two mentors. I think it needs to be. And like you said, Mariah is a great choice. I think that, and the winner of the Owen Hart tournament wrestles the champion at Wembley Stadium, correct?
Yes.
And
so that would presumably be Mariah May versus Toni Storm if Toni Storm retains all throughout this.
There's all kinds of ways you can ratchet up the tension as she slowly moves. So say that Toni beats Mina, right? And Mariah even could possibly side with Toni, perhaps, or stay in neutral, whatever works. But I mean, she stays with Toni, doesn't turn on Toni here. Imagine that tension between Toni and Mariah ratcheting up with each rung of the ladder she climbs, with each win she gets in the tournament. Toni's got to look a little more nervous about her. And then, leading into Wembley Stadium where, Saraya is British also, but where Mariah could get the shot, that makes an awful lot of sense to me.
So it's interesting because Toni was the one that sponsored Mariah to get into the tournament, right? Mm-hmm. So if Mariah ends up getting the shot at Toni as a result of Toni's own advocacy, it's kind of one of those, the student becomes the master kind of thing. And there's definitely been a sense of Mariah May perhaps wanting not to be Toni Storm, but the next Toni Storm. That kind of thing where it's like, I'm going to be you now and I'm going to make you go away, that kind of thing. And it's very curious, but if you cannot see that Mariah May is destined for a very big summer, I don't know what to tell you. She's destined for a very big summer.
If we've learned nothing else from sci-fi over the last 100 years, it's that all creations eventually turn on their master. Now, next, we have Forbidden Door here. This is not a New Japan match at all. This is MJF and Hechicero. So at least it's intriguing. I'm interested in seeing.
I'm just predicting MJF wants to get in and get out, and so he's going to be the first match on the card.
Yeah, probably so.
The match was always supposed to be Rush and MJF. They had their match a week ago. It was fantastic. This was the match they decided to do because they couldn't do Rush and MJF on the pay-per-view. It will be fine. We do have some Hechicero match updates from CMLL later on that we will cover after we get through the Forbidden Door stuff. But this has an opportunity to over-deliver, but there really isn't much to say when the MJF has done his best to look past this match as if he does not even care about it and he is contractually obligated, he makes other people feel like it's contractually obligated to watch it rather than enjoy it.
Well said. All right, what's up next here? Hiroshi Tanahashi and we've talked about this one. Tanahashi and the Acclaimed against the Elite here. So, like you mentioned, I have a feeling that this will probably be Okada getting a pin on this one. Whether it's over Tanahashi or one of the Acclaimed, I don't know, but I don't see the Elite losing this one.
Yeah, no, Venkin had actually mentioned earlier about when I talked about what does Okada and them have actually done, and he mentioned, didn't they win Anarchy in the Arena? And I was like, yeah, and like in my mind, it's like it meant absolutely nothing. You know, it's like It was just a match to have in order to appease the crowd. But this is more of the same. It's just they're getting wins so that the audience sees that they are a big deal, but they have not done anything so effective where it's like, okay, you made the Acclaimed life a living hell. No one likes the Acclaimed right now. Kind of baby faces. So that's kind of a rough position to be in.
Here's the one. Now, I'm really excited about this one. Shingo Takagi, Bryan Danielson. It's an Owen Hart tournament quarterfinal. While I have a feeling that Shingo is going to be doing the job in this one because Danielson seems to me to be the story here going into the Owen Hart, I'm just looking for a great match here. I think we're going to get it. Barring an early injury, God forbid, I don't see how these two don't deliver an absolute wonderful match. It's two of the very best in the world.
This was the match that you're like, yeah, okay, this is what will make the show for me. You expect this to be a good match. Like you go in saying, yeah, we're getting Danielson and Shingo, but we always get at least like one match of that level that you're just like, okay, we're getting that. So it almost sounds like trite and kind of shitty, but it's like you are expecting like this kind of match on the card, right? And so if you are selling people on this show on this card, you got to do more, unfortunately, than tell you like Danielson and Shingo, you're getting this match. Like, great, awesome. What else you got? You know what I mean? And that's kind of the trap that they fell in, is that they weren't really following up with much after they announced this match. And I am super into it. I do not think that there is a big chance that Shingo wins this match whatsoever. You know, I think with the stakes and what we have planned, I fully expect Bryan Danielson to move forward, given it's an AEW show and all these things. But I'm here for it. I'm ready to have a lot of fun with it. If we are talking about it being a match of the year candidate on Sunday night when we do our live show, I will not be surprised whatsoever. But there is a part of me that selfishly is taking it for granted because I expect a match like this on every Forbidden Door at this point.
Venkin says, my statement stands. If you have a bad match with Shingo, it's time to retire. Yeah, I don't think we have to worry about that with Bryan. And he said, and Shark says it's a starting point, basically, for the tournament. Yeah, I think so. And, it just reminds me of the shut up and take my money matches like Bryan versus Sabre and all that. And next up, speaking of Zack Sabre Jr., has had a very busy time in North America recently, facing Orange Cassidy. And that is certainly intriguing. Orange is a really talented guy. And, of course, he has made that gimmick work for him. Zach is brilliantly talented, so I'm expecting this one to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is gonna be one of those. Oh, I was surprised about Orange Cassidy. Why are you surprised about Orange Cassidy?
I know
we go through this every year.
You're right. You're right. Yeah,
every year we go through the. Oh, I didn't realize Orange Cassidy was as good as he was. Orange Cassidy is very, very good, and he is just in a gimmick that does not show it in a way that he should probably be able to do more with.
And I understand the criticism of the gimmick. I really do. I really do. But this is a talented wrestler.
Yeah, this is going to be a fantastic match. A+, no notes. Moving on.
Toni Storm, Mina. We probably talked about this one to death. Toni and Mina. I don't see any reason why Mina should win this thing. As far as storyline goes, I think Toni needs to retain right here. But it'll be a hell of a match. Toni knows how to work this style. Mina's a fabulous worker. You got the Mariah May intrigue. So I'm excited about it.
I went from less than zero interest to this match when they started the build to this potentially being the most interesting match on the card to me, in terms of, Mina Shirakawa having her like debut moment on AEW pay-per-view. I think her and Toni are gonna, go back to the golden days of Stardom in a lot of ways. And if they don't, I'm gonna be wondering why. and, having the Mariah May subplot, in the background of all this. This is the most compelling thing that they have built to throughout the entire thing. And I believe that more than even the main event.
Going to get to some comments here. Venkin mentioned, by the way, that he really didn't care that much about Orange versus Zack. Well, it can be a self-contained thing. Maybe it's just a little 10, 15 minutes that you could maybe enjoy a little bit, if not set the world on fire. But he also thinks that Mina beating Toni could work. I suppose it could. I don't anticipate her coming over that much, but who knows? I mean, maybe there's a deal that we don't know about. Shark mentions that Zack is such a workhorse. He's always working everywhere, it seems. And that's on top of a full-time New Japan schedule. He never seems to be hurt or take time off. It's an important point. It's one of the reasons that I think he's such a brilliant opponent for guys like Tanahashi. You can work a match with Zack, and it's compelling, and it's exciting, and it has its twists and turns without taking bumps, heavy bumps, because there's so much mat work and submission work and pin scrambles and things that you're just not going over the top rope and diving and smashing into barricades. It's a way to have a very different kind of match. It's why he and Tanahashi tear the house down, even though Tanahashi really can't move all that much. It's just and so it also allows Zack to work a lot without hurting himself a whole ton. And so that I think is a very smart move by him. And
personally, I fully expect Zack to win that match, by the way.
Okay. And
given that OC has no friends and they put him over strong, winning a 2-on-1 handicap match, I feel like the writing's on the wall that Zack is winning that match.
As for this women's match, Shark says, despite being Stardom versus AEW, Mina and Toni doesn't feel like a Forbidden Door match, given this has so much build. Yeah, it does not feel like here's just two interesting people meeting each other. There is a full-blown feud and story that this could be part of an AEW pay-per-view and not be out of place at all.
Is that good or bad? Let me ask you this, right?
In this case, it's good. It's different than the rest of the card, which I appreciate.
Like, you have fully integrated the Stardom talent into AEW. Does that diminish the Stardom link, or does that make it feel stronger? It's like they talk about having the New Japan and Stardom link and only doing it a couple of times throughout the year. But if you had a constant pathway for some of this stuff where there were specific talents that were coming back and forth because there was a storyline reason, and it was also helping exposure for Stardom, is that more special than once in a while? Is it how you do it, or is it the way you do it?
I don't have a problem with there being a steady presence on this. I've been saying that one of the things they could really do with this is have more integration, because several people, for instance, from AEW, we've seen it with Xena, with Mariah May, and you really improve working in Stardom fast. And I think that would be healthy for a lot of AEW's kind of mid-level workers. Like Anna Jay could use a tour over there. Anna Jay's a talented woman, but she could really use that iron sharpening iron and going over to there. And so if you have some of these Stardom women wrestling in AEW, or send some AEW women over to Japan for certain things, I think that could really benefit everybody. It would give some fresh faces for Stardom. It could give it could really give a chance to the only way you get better is working people that are better than you. And that means if they wrestle more Stardom wrestlers, then that's only good for them. So this is one where I think you could do a more steady thing and have them go back and forth. That wouldn't bother me a bit. I'd like to see a little bit more of that.
Shark had good insight.
What's that? Oh, he says Mina Shirakawa legitimately is part of AEW canon. Yeah, certainly with this angle she is. There are definitely pros and cons to it, but I say it's generally positive. It's hard to look at this angle and how interested we are in it and say that it's been a net negative, I think.
This is what you wanted to see out of the New Japan relationship, right? Is that you saw authentically the wrestler as they are in their promotion coming over here and feeling like it was a seamless fit.
Oh, that's a really good point, because Mina Shirakawa is absolutely Mina Shirakawa. Yes. This isn't Okada getting into a suit and hanging out with the Bucks. And
this isn't even Shingo doing an Americanized AEW version of his shtick. Doing
that's a smart thing point,
without the signature stuff that you're familiar with when you're watching New Japan. And you're like, oh, I'm getting that moment here. The camera operators don't know that it's time and all these other things. And it you know that something is missing, and it's okay, but you're still it doesn't hit quite the same way.
Yeah. Okay. That's a very good point. Mina is definitely Mina in this, and nothing. She's even doing the dance and the whole thing. But seeing Mariah do the Club Venus dance again was pretty cool too on Wednesday. It's nice. Okay. After that, we have Mercedes Mone and Stephanie Vaquer. Now, this is the NJPW Strong title for Vaquer against the TBS title of Mercedes Mone. I think we're finally getting the course correction that they've wanted for a long time. Monet has been doing all these promos saying that belt was made for me, literally was. And so this was the idea in the first place before Mercedes injured her ankle. And I expect them to go ahead and put the title on. It was cool to see Mercedes show up at Arena Mexico and confront her. Not on video, like walk down the steps at Arena Mexico and confronted Vaquer. It's going to be a hell of a good match. The first one was a good match. With Vaquer, I mean, this is the idea for this belt all along. I love Stephanie Vaquer. I think she's incredibly talented. She's been through a lot and overcome a lot, and she's going to be a star for a very long time. And but this needs to be Mercedes' thing. The NJPW Strong title, they can put her on those shows to help her sell tickets, and that's not a small deal. I think this is going to be Mercedes in the long shot. I really don't see Vaquer getting through this one with a win.
Yeah, this definitely feels like course correction. That's not a bad thing for Stephanie Vaquer. She has made the most of her opportunities up to this point, and there's going to be plenty of opportunities. I believe that she has definitely opened some eyes and made herself known to a wider audience over the course of the last year.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
Good for her. But this is, in order for the rest of the women's wrestling division to succeed outside of WWE, it is incumbent right now to put a spotlight on Mercedes Mone with the hope that she can elevate the rest of women's wrestling as she is trying to do.
Yeah, then what we have here, Venkin's asking what's the time limit, 30 or 60. I don't think it really matters. I think if it ain't 30, Vaquer's losing, he says. But yeah, Vaquer's losing. I mean, I think I would feel very confident that she's going to lose this one.
They are not paying Mercedes Mone this money to not win like matches and be dominant. They do not have several women's wrestling stars like they do the men's wrestling stars, and they can pick and choose who would be the best title holder to hold their world titles. Like Mercedes is, when she's in the ring, she connects. They are figuring out how to communicate effectively the best way that she is a star, and these video packages, frankly speaking, are doing a better job than her own like promos, but that may end up coming time. But they are figuring out the package, they are figuring out the presentation, and they are all in, no pun intended, on making sure that Mercedes Mone is around to make the rest of women's wrestling as best as it can be.
Let's get to some comments here. Venkin mentions Sean Ross Sapp reported Mone's time with the NJPW wasn't over, so I'm sure Vaquer loses again. I really think that's the idea. They just wanted to have her on there to help main event these strong shows here in the U.S. Shark said, as far as someone being canon, Jack Perry was another example. All special reasons aside, he was legitimately in the framework of New Japan for a while. I'd like to see more of that in AEW, New Japan, and Stardom, that integration.
How cool would it have been if they were able to hold off Jack Perry until Forbidden Door?
Man. Flaming Shark mentions in ring, the Monet Vaquer match will blow some people away, I think, and people will be talking about Vaquer and why she's not in other places after this show. I think I agree with you. I think she also is in a lot of places these days. A lot of people are using Stephanie. I think the word is getting out about just how talented she is. And again, overcome a lot. I mean, the one guy from the Dynamitas tried to kill her, for God's sakes. He's on trial for some. She's been through a lot, and she's overcome it. Venkin says there are free spots in the 5-star after Vaquer loses, and they'd be stupid not to do it. Boy, I'd love to see that. That especially a tournament like that, man. Yeah, I'd love to see it. And then Colin just says, have folk like Athena, Diana, Anna Jay, and Tay, and when she comes back, Willow on excursion to Japan. All those women wrestlers, all those wrestlers could use the time there. Athena's already damn good. You could actually take her and put her closer to the top as like a star coming in. The rest, like Diana, Anna, Jay, and Tay, they could work the undercard. Now, I let that iron sharpen that iron. They could protect some of the Stardom wrestlers. So I'd be down with stuff like that. And so that's those matches there. We expect Mercedes Mone to come out of it as NJPW Strong Champion and probably have a major match at Capital Collision. One thing I wanted to mention, by the way, before we move on, Capital Collision, not without a single match only a date announced, no matches, has sold 924 tickets, which isn't half bad, considering there aren't anything. There's a long way out, and nothing's announced. And the reason I bring that up, the two shows I attended last year, one in just outside of Dallas, another one in Las Vegas, had about 1,000 people at it. After all the matches and all the walk up and everything like that, this one's already sold over 900 tickets without anything announced. I got to think that's a decent sign that people are
do people
at
think
least showing
Mercedes
a little.
Mone is for sure going to be there?
They're showing a little faith that New Japan's going to deliver something they want to see, at least 1,000. And then once the matches are announced, then we'll see how many people pick it up after that. But encouraging over last year, which is all I asked. Right? Year over year.
August 30th is a great date to do a pro wrestling show. Honestly, the Labor Day, the SummerSlam, the All-Ins, all that stuff. Like all the dates have been passed, where you start heading into the winter time. So I definitely think after Moxley has been like the linchpin for the first half of New Japan shows for AEW, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of Mercedes Mone on these shows on the second half, as long as she has that New Japan Strong title. And she's working Wednesdays for AEW and Saturdays for New Japan Pro Wrestling. She's already shown up on CMLL on Saturday. What's the difference between doing a New Japan show instead?
After that, we have the semifinal of the night, Jon Moxley, IWGP World Heavyweight Champion, versus Tetsuya Naito. We've bantered about this back and forth. I really feel like this is probably going to be the title change that'll get Naito back to Japan and get the world title back in Japan. I feel like this is probably the plan from the very beginning. I feel like this title reign, whether we want to mark it a success or not, and I think having the title gone from Japan this much, probably not the best idea. But Jeremy, I feel like this is happening exactly the way they planned it. That he's lost. Naito lost it when they decided he was going to lose it. He's going to gain it back. I think the thing was lose it there, pick it back up at Forbidden Door, go into the G1 as champion. So I would be very surprised if Moxley ends up winning this thing or coming out of it with the belt. And I think we're going to have a champion Naito going into G1 there. That's just my thought on this one. Anything else, you're going to have to convince me you're making the right call here, and that's going to be a challenge.
So, did you hear or read the Tokyo Sports kayfabe/work headline from Naito about this match from a couple of days ago?
Was this the one where if he loses,
he fails to win the IWGP title at Forbidden Door, he will give up his spot at the G1 to Jon Moxley?
Okay, so let's make it clear. They will not. Man, I'm putting myself out here live on YouTube. God, and everybody can hear me say this. They will not take Tetsuya Naito out of the G1. No way, no how, no chance. I think if there was ever a sign that Naito's getting the belt back, it's that one. I can't fathom it.
I think somebody posted that somewhere, and I think all I responded was LOL.
Yeah.
Like it was one of those like Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania. Tell them you're winning without telling people you're winning kind of thing.
Yeah, Colin mentions this. God, good to see you, Colin. Glad you're here. He says the title has to be on a New Japan guy for the G1. Yeah, sure does. When is Capital Collision? In a couple of months, August 30th.
August 30th.
August 30th up there. And
you're going to my brother fly out there and go see the show. He lives in Virginia. I was like, yeah, there you go. So yeah, but I am going to Fantastica Mania in a couple of weeks down the street from my house.
We'll be looking at that here on the show.
We will preview that, I think, next week, or at least go through the card, because we are running out of time, and we have spent a ton of time on a forbidden topic.
Let's see. Shark says, I honestly didn't mind it as long as the title's in the G1. He defended it enough for me. Yeah, he made defenses. That's not the point I'm trying to make. I think he made all the dates he's going to do. Just for box office in Japan, I think the champion probably should be on the house shows and things. But I don't have a problem with Moxley as the champion. I think he's over with the New Japan crowd. I think that the people like him. He likes working for New Japan. I don't see it as a negative. The only part that's a negative is not having the champion on these house shows. I do think might have dinged attendance a little bit, but I can't say I have proof of that. It's just a vibe I have. It feels different not having the champion there.
If this were a performance review and a job, right? Jon Moxley as the champion checked off all the boxes. He carried himself like the champion. He had main event title matches. He did everything that he needed to do in order to make sure that the lineage and the legacy of that title was held up as long as he was doing it. Did he exceed expectations? Absolutely not. Is that his fault? I don't think so at all. I think that there were many mouths to feed and a lot of people with a lot of great ideas about how they would use this title when they had it over in AEW. And it did not reflect well on the title, and it did not reflect well on the booking of AEW and the respect of the IWGP title. You know, like Konosuke Takeshita being in the G1 is absolutely fantastic. In hindsight, there's absolutely no reason to have him in a title eliminator match with Jon Moxley in order to have an opportunity at that title. You know, like stuff like that is just kind of like self-inflicted wounds. The powerhouse match.
None of that's Moxley's fault, you know. And every time he was in there, he wrestled well. And the other thing is, he puts that title over. And you know why? Because Moxley does respect the IWGP title. He does respect New Japan Pro Wrestling.
He checked off all the boxes, but he did not exceed expectations. And I think that is a fair evaluation of his job performance as the IWGP champion.
And Dunstan mentions if Naito's isn't in the G1, attendance would be dead in the water. It would definitely be hurt by it. And he mentions they need the champion for various reasons outside of G1, for future matches, for the second half to sell tickets, have people invested for Wrestle Kingdom. Yeah, it needs to come home. The belt needs to come home. And they need to see it in the small towns too. After that, again, only New Japan adjacent, because Will Ospreay is sadly no longer one of our New Japan guys, but he will be challenging Swerve Strickland for the AEW World Heavyweight title in a match that should be absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, this feels early. If you've been following AEW programming, you were kind of tracking that Will Ospreay would be the challenging main event Wembley kind of thing, and that doesn't seem to be the case. They have different plans, but these two have met before. 2016 had a fantastic match, I believe, in Germany for WXW, I believe. They're going to kill it. This is absolutely going to be a main event match. But if I had to put any money on anything, I think MJF ends up screwing Will Ospreay at the end out of the title.
Okay. And then, of course, we do have Konosuke Takeshita versus Mark Briscoe versus Jack Perry versus Dante Martin versus Leo Rush versus El Phantasmo in the ladder match for the vacant AT&T, the vacant AEW TNT championship. There's a lot of acronyms floating around here. They're going pretty cheap there in Jacksonville. You can just pick them up for a dime a dozen. AEW TNT title match there. We also have the Learning Tree and Jeff Cobb with Brian Keith versus Samoa Joe, Hook, and Katsuyori Shibata in a match that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
So Brian Keith is in the match?
He's not. He's on the sidelines. He's in their corner. The only thing I'm going to say, Jeremy, here, the only way this can be redeemed is if after the match, Jeff Cobb gets a win on either Hook or Shibata or whatever, grabs the microphone and says, "Nobody's going to take me up on my TV title challenge. I want somebody out here right now." It's the only thing that redeems it. If it's not that, thank you. No, thank you.
They have a couple of days in order to make this match happen before the G1, for sure. You know, it's like the G1 starts on July 20th, and you have, 2.5 weeks, 3 Dynamites to pull this match off. I'm here for it. But I get that it's a pay-per-view and not a TV show. That TV title match should have been on the pay-per-view. That is the kind of thing that sells the pay-per-view, doesn't get you ratings. The hardcore watch that match, not the people that are going to be tuning in for the ratings.
And
There'd be nothing on TV.
Dunstan, he said, I was on the train when I tried to post, but I hope to God I see Tsuji spear Okada at Forbidden Door. I'll be there live, so I want that more than anything. I mean, you could do it.
I don't know how that scenario happened, but I will 1000% shout you out if that happens.
yeah, absolutely. The other thing about that, of course, Tsuji was one of the guys that showed very little on camera, in character, respect to Okada on the way out. Remember, he was just like, "You're a disappointment. You're an embarrassment for leaving like this." So there's a little bit of heat there, animosity between the two, in character, of course.
I feel like guys like Grado Khan, Sonata, and Evil just want nothing to do with Forbidden Door. Like, you can see it on Sonata's face, like last year. You can see it on Grado Khan's face, like 2 years ago. There's no Desperado this year. You know, it's like this feels contractually obligated.
All right. So some of the guys were in Mexico. I'm going to run this down a little bit here. They did a tour in Mexico, did a few days there. So on June 21st, that's last Friday, in Arena, Mexico, Místico in the main event faced Hiromu Takahashi and beat him in 23 minutes. And it was a very good match. Michael Oku and Zack Sabre Jr. were there. They beat El Averno and Volador Jr. Rocky Romero teamed up with Taiji Ishimori to beat Mascara Dorada and Templario. Stephanie Vaquer, of course, beat Catalina in an NJPW Strong title match. That was indeed a match for the NJPW title. She has several belts, by the way. She's champion of a bunch of different ways in Mexico. Bunch of titles. Monet, actually, like I mentioned, came out afterwards and confronted her. And Bad Dude Tito was in a match early on in that card. Saturday in Arena Coliseo, that's also in the metro area. Rocky went to a 10-minute draw with Angel de Oro. Hechicero beat Zack Sabre Jr. in a 2 out of 3 falls singles match. Místico and Ishimori defeated Hiromu and Volador in the main event. They were back in Arena Mexico on Sunday. I like this one, Jeremy. This is how it's listed. El Averno beat Rocky thanks to a, quote, unpunished foul, unquote.
Huh.
There's a lot of unpunished fouls in wrestling, aren't there? Ishimori teamed with Hijo del Villano Tercera and Villano Tercera Jr. So the two brothers who are both sons of the great Villano number 3. They defeated, so they teamed up with Ishimori to defeat Hiromu, Magia Blanca, and Rugido. And Mascara Dorada and Místico wrestled Magnus and Zack Sabre Jr. and won by disqualification. So that was that one. And then they went to Puebla, Arena Puebla, which is a cool little arena if you ever get to see a show on YouTube from Arena Puebla. It's a cool little building. It's almost like straight up. So you feel like you can high five the people in the balcony. And that one, it was Templario over Hiromu. So Hiromu was having all these matches, but doing jobs mostly. And so were most of the New Japan guys. But Zack Sabre Jr. defeated Virus at that one. And Dorada and Místico beat Rocky and Taiji Ishimori. So the guests were putting them over for the most part. And then they participated in a gauntlet match, Arena Mexico on Tuesday. That was first they had a battle royal to determine the seedings. And then they had the gauntlet match right afterwards. So Místico ended up winning the gauntlet and defeating Zack Sabre Jr. to finish it off. So that was that. Let's see. And Shark mentions one other thing here. In kayfabe, that disrespect from Tsuji to Okada makes more sense now that Okada immediately showed his true colors as a heel as the second he came to AEW. That's a nice little storyline point, doesn't it?
I mean, in my mind, I just see none of the New Japan guys, now that he's not the top guy there, they don't want to do jobs for him. Now, we are running a little low on time. I know you had a couple of ideas about how you wanted to go about with making through. Would you be willing to go with your Young Blood update next week and we talk about Sika right now?
Yeah, we can do that. Let's go ahead and talk about Sika, but we can do the Young Blood. So, like I said, we're out of time here. So next week, we're going to be talking about the show from the 3rd, July 3rd.
Yes.
We have our recap show after Forbidden Door. That'll be on this thing on this YouTube feed Sunday night after the show. And then if you listen to this as a podcast, that'll show up as a podcast in your feed as well. Next Thursday, we're going to talk about, I have this prepared, but we'll go with it, Oscar Loibe and Yuto Nakashima. We haven't seen him or heard from him for a while as they're on excursion. So I'm going to give a little update as to what the guys have been up to in Europe. They've been spending their time in all over Europe, actually, more places than I had realized, Jeremy. So we'll talk a little bit about what that is. And unfortunately, one of the guys got hurt. We're going to talk about the injury too.
That is part of your rundown when we start next week.
All right. Wanted to mention Sika, of course. This is one of the great heel tag teams of the 70s and 80s were the Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika. And part of that great Samoan dynasty in wrestling, my goodness, the tree is large and very distinguished. Sika is the father of Rosie and also the father of Roman Reigns, for that matter. So some of the bigger stars out there, and Sika and his brother Afa were the Wild Samoans. Sometimes they were called the Samoans, sometimes they were called the Islanders for a little while there, but they were one of the great heel teams of that era. Now they grew up in San Francisco as big guys who basically attended the matches as fans and used to get into fist fights with the heels all the time. So Pat Patterson loved to tell the story about how sometimes the toughest thing about wrestling in that territory was not having the match. It was fighting their way through the Samoans on the way back to the locker room. So eventually they became wrestlers, and they began in 1973, way back in 1973, and they began working in territories across the U.S. I'm going to boil this down real tight here, but they started off in Arizona, that had a place that had several promoters try to start territories. There was a small territory in Arizona. That's where they began. But eventually they worked their way up to All-Star Wrestling, which is in British Columbia, Canada. They worked in Stampede. And then after that, they started making their name in other places. They began working Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. They worked for the Sheik in Detroit, all through Tennessee, Alabama, and Kentucky. And it would be a thing where the Samoans would come in, roll their way through a whole bunch of people, leave a whole bunch of babyface team corpses in their wake. Half the time they would win the local tag team title until the top babyface team would beat them and vanquish them, and then it was on to the next territory. It was very much during that time when a heel team would travel from territory to territory, essentially having a run of 4 to 6 months or so, win the title, lose the title, move on to the next spot, and then the next heel team would come in. And the Samoans became one of the top ones in that area. So in a matter of 3 years, doing just what I talked about, they had been seen by almost the entire country. They made their first trip to Japan in 1977. It was for IWE, the promotion that was really one of the top three. There were three in the 70s that were viable companies. New Japan, of course, All Japan. This is in the wake of the JWA falling apart. And then you had the IWE, International Wrestling Enterprise, it was called. IWE was mostly affiliated with the AWA champion. All Japan was with the NWA champion, and New Japan was working a lot with WWF. So that was how that worked. They all had their connections. So started working for IWE and went in right toward the top, wrestling guys like Rusha Kimura, Animal Hamaguchi, Ryuma Go, the great Kasatsu. So they were pushed right away, and they would generally win until the very end of the run when they would put over the biggest stars in IWE, and that would be the final act. They would just go through everybody until the local heroes finally got the pin on Afa and Sika and sent them packing. Did several tours for IWE. They made occasional runs all the way through 1980. So from 77, 78, 79. In that time, they began working for the WWF. And they really became well known from that. As that was a big run for them, where they were put with Captain Lou Albano, won the WWF tag team titles. They were either second or third from the top, depending on how you want to look at that card, at the Shea Stadium show that featured Bruno Sammartino and Larry Zbyszko, which is a very famous wrestling show. One of the biggest gates they ever did. It was in Shea Stadium in New York after Zbyszko had turned on Bruno. So a match that didn't even have a title involved, just a grudge match between Bruno and Zbyszko, drew this monster crowd. But second from the top, or third, Andre the Giant wrestled Hulk Hogan, healed Hulk Hogan on that show, which is a big deal in 1980. Hogan was only about a year in the business, but already a major star. That was before Rocky III even. And but it was the Samoans, Afa and Sika, facing former world champion Pedro Morales and the current WWF champion Bob Backlund. So they were a major part of, at the time, a show that drew one of the biggest gates in wrestling history. So big stars there. But IWE, their connection to Japan, was dying off. That company just fell into a decline. By 1981, it was all over. So they worked for New Japan afterwards. And IWE kind of split, where a bunch of their stars went to work for Baba and All Japan. A bunch of them went to work for Inoki and New Japan. And the foreigners had to make their pick. And it turned out that they went with New Japan. So New Japan snapped them up in early 1981 for the New Year Golden Series. And their first match, to give you an idea of where they were slotted, was against Antonio Inoki and Tatsumi Fujinami.
Hey.
So directly to the top, directly into the main events. And of course, they were brawlers. You know, they were the typical stereotype Samoan kick, punch, headbutt, you know, that type of thing. They looked enough alike that they could do the little switcheroos sometimes with the referees, and they were just a classic heel team. And so with that in mind, the classic heel teams didn't really wrestle all that much. They mostly just brawled and things. But That got over in Japan, of course, because they could just brutalize the Japanese guys and they could play the underdog role that always worked so well. They ended up teaming up with guys like Bad News Allen, who would be Bad News Brown later in WWF. They had 6-man tags with Seiji Sakaguchi, Riki Choshu, Kengo Kimura, Strong Kobayashi. So basically, top guys and only top guys. They were absolute main eventers through that tour. They also worked with Ken Patera and a very, very young Tom Pritchard. So they stayed for the whole New Year Golden Series tour, and they returned for the Madison Square Garden Tag League. And that was the what they called at the time the Real World Tag Team Tournament. So it was the same format, round robin type of tournament. They were brought back for that big tag team run, and that was toward the end of the year. It happened about the same time of year that the current tag league happens. And they only scored 2 points in the tournament, but they also didn't do any jobs. They got disqualified a lot for just being too wild as the Wild Samoans. So they didn't lay down, but they got DQ'd a lot. So a couple of double countouts thrown in there as well. Only scored the 2 points. But to give you an idea of some of the other teams in that one, Jeremy, the winner of the tournament, Andre the Giant and Rene Goulet. So,
all right.
And then Inoki and Fujinami and Stan Hansen and Dick Murdoch was another team there. So quite a pretty fast league.
Literally heavy hitters at the time.
Oh, yeah. Tiger Taguchi and Killer Khan were in there. And then, the Japanese teams like Sakaguchi and Kengo Kimura, Russia Kimura and Animal.
That might be named, but you are underscoring like very important names in the generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier, Russia Kimura and Animal Higuchi were in that. That was one of the top teams from IWE. So they had moved over to New Japan after that promotion fell apart. So they were beating and wrestling and fighting some of the top teams in Japan, some of the top foreign teams in the world, and top teams from 2 different promotions, the former IWE and New Japan. So they were big deals. Unfortunately, that was about it for them in New Japan, because when they went back, they were in such demand. They worked for Georgia, Mid-South, back to the WWF. They simply didn't need to go back. They were making so much money in the U.S. as a top drawing heel tag team that they didn't end up going back to Japan. So that was their run. But in the end, just one of the most influential tag teams. And of course, we're seeing the legacy of the Samoans, which goes back so far and so many branches. The Maivias and everything else. It's all kind of tied in together. But if you look at the Usos. Rosie, he helped train Yokozuna, Rodney Anoa'i. And then, of course, Roman Reigns. Like basically, Afa and Sika are responsible for a massive part of the top level WWE angle for like past 5 years. So you really don't have modern wrestling without these guys in the same way. It would look very, very different. So highly influential, a team that was always got over everywhere they went. And then was responsible for some of the top things, top angles that we have seen and top stars that we've seen over the past few years. So Sika passed away earlier this week. So thoughts and are with his family and his friends and the entire line there of the Samoan wrestlers that have come from it. I'm going to miss Sika. And just as a weird trivia note, Sika was probably, what was it, on the third match I ever saw live. So he was a part of the first show I ever went to. And there was an aura, like when Sika came, he's a big guy, you see the look right there with the bushy hair and the beard and everything else. Like he had a presence to him that you just thought, that's not a man to be trifled with. Indeed, he was not. So Sika passed away this past week. And that's a little bit about his life in Japan.
All the best to his family and his loved ones, as always.
So we went a little over this week, but it turns out we had more to talk about than 1 hour and a half could contain. We will be back.
So, yeah.
Make sure you enjoy the action. Sunday, we have Forbidden Door. We also have July 3rd. By the time we come back here at our regular time slot, we will have the finals for the qualification rounds of the G1 Climax tournament. And we'll also preview the July 5th show, which is the Tokyo Budokan. That'll include a title match, Ryusuke Taguchi's return match, and all of that. So with that in mind, we're going to sign off for now. We'll see you again Sunday night. Anything you want to add before we sign away, Jeremy?
Can't wait to do extra hours with you guys. Let's meet up on Sunday night, and we'll see you on July 4th.
So we'll have on Sunday, the Power Bombshells will be back with a pre-show. And then we will have this thing covered like cheese on a pizza. And indeed, Colin, there is a live show after Forbidden Door, and it'll be Speaking of Strong Style. We're handling it. So for Jeremy Finestone, I'm Stephen Conway. We'll talk to you Sunday night, and we're looking forward to Forbidden Door 2024.